She broke free and never looked back. In 2025, Jinger Duggar Vuolo's transformation is nothing short of jaw-dropping. Once bound by strict fundamentalist rules, she's now living a life of freedom, independence, and bold choices. From her marriage to Jeremy Vuolo to her modern lifestyle, here's how Jinger rewrote her future. Those who love Jinger Duggar Vuolo know that in January 2025, she released her highly anticipated second memoir, People Pleaser, Breaking Free from the Burden of Imaginary Expectations, a follow-up to her 2023 bestseller, Becoming Free Indeed. With this new installment, Jinger continues her personal and spiritual reckoning, delving deeper into the psychological grip of her upbringing and peeling back the layers of religious pressure she grew up under the teachings of Bill Gothard's Institute in Basic Life Principles, IBLP. While Becoming Free Indeed first introduced readers to the theological shift Jinger had undergone, away from the rigid, fear-based doctrines of her childhood, People Pleaser offers an even more personal and emotionally vulnerable narrative. In it, she focuses not just on the teachings themselves, but on how they shaped her identity, her relationships, and her self-worth as someone who constantly felt the need to meet impossible standards to be accepted and loved. Jinger grew up in the Duggar family, a household that became famous through 19 kids and counting, and was raised under a very specific conservative interpretation of Christianity that emphasized strict authority structures, modesty, emotional suppression, and absolute obedience. In People Pleaser, she bravely unpacks how deeply the IBLP's teachings instilled a fear of disappointing both God and others, to the point where her entire identity became rooted in meeting other people's expectations, real or perceived. She writes candidly about how, as a young girl, she internalized the belief that any misstep could result in severe consequences from God. The pressure to please others, especially male authority figures, wasn't just encouraged. It was enforced as divine order. Jinger describes sleepless nights, riddled with guilt and anxiety, terrified she had unknowingly stepped out of line. Her self-worth was tied directly to performance, not grace. Central to both of Jinger's books is her critical examination of Bill Gothard, the controversial founder of IBLP. In People Pleaser, she elaborates more fully on how his teachings, which the Duggars followed diligently, functioned like spiritual manipulation. Gothard's ideology emphasized total submission to authority, a rejection of worldly influences, and a long list of principles that were often presented as biblical mandates, despite having little to no scriptural basis. Jinger refers to these teachings as cult-like, not in the sense of worshiping a person, but because of how they discouraged critical thinking, isolated followers from outside influences, and taught that blessing or suffering in life was a direct result of one's level of obedience. She details how Gothard's version of Christianity was less about a personal relationship with God and more about adhering to a rigid formula for blessing and protection. Her reflections are especially powerful because they are not filled with anger or mockery. Instead, they come from a place of deep sorrow, grieving the years she spent buried under false guilt and fear, and the relationships strained by legalism. She makes clear that her aim is not to condemn her family or her parents, but to share how the system they trusted harmed her spiritually and emotionally. What distinguishes People Pleaser from typical deconstruction memoirs is Jinger's steadfast commitment to preserving her core Christian faith. Rather than abandoning belief entirely, she set out to sift through the damage and salvage the truth. In the book, she describes how, with the help of her husband Jeremy Vuolo and trusted mentors, she began studying the Bible in a new light, one that emphasized grace, freedom, and truth over rule-keeping and shame. She shares the slow, painful process of letting go of legalism and learning to trust that God's love doesn't hinge on her performance. Her tone is often humble, acknowledging the difficulty of unlearning deeply ingrained thought patterns. But she also writes with growing confidence, celebrating the peace she has found in knowing she no longer needs to be perfect to be accepted by God. In People Pleaser, Jinger also opens up about how her people-pleasing tendencies affected her marriage, friendships, and even her public image. As a public figure, she felt pressure to maintain a spotless image, one that often conflicted with her inner questions and struggles. She describes the toll of smiling on camera while privately battling fear and confusion. Her honesty is striking. She doesn't claim to have everything figured out, but she does claim freedom. The freedom to be imperfect, to have boundaries, to say no, and to let go of unrealistic expectations. The book serves as both a deeply personal testimony and a broader message for anyone feeling crushed by the pressure to meet other people's ideals. While Jinger avoids directly criticizing her parents or siblings, People Pleaser represents a profound divergence from the Duggar family brand. She isn't just reinterpreting her past, she's reshaping it, using her voice to advocate for a more compassionate, authentic version of faith. For fans who watched her grow up on television, this memoir is both a revelation and a reckoning. By January 2025, it's clear that Jinger has become a leading voice in a movement of former fundamentalists seeking healing and clarity. People Pleaser is more than a memoir. It's a blueprint for how to hold on to faith while rejecting fear, how to stay grounded in truth while walking away from toxic doctrine, and how to stop living for the approval of others and start living in freedom. In the years following their departure from the Duggar family's public sphere, Jinger Duggar Vuolo and her husband Jeremy Vuolo have taken significant steps to build a life rooted in intentionality, privacy, and independence. One of the most defining symbols of this new chapter came in 2024, when the couple purchased a Tudor-style home in Santa Clarita, California, for just under $2 million. A decision that spoke volumes about where they now stand emotionally, spiritually, and personally. This home wasn't just a real estate investment, it was a declaration of permanence. For Jinger, whose early life was marked by transience in thought and routine conformity to others' expectations, the stability represented by homeownership in Santa Clarita carried deep personal meaning. After years of questioning her upbringing, deconstructing harmful teachings, and reshaping her worldview, settling into a place of their own was more than putting down physical roots. It was about claiming agency, security, and freedom. The couple had already made California their home several years earlier when Jeremy began attending the Master's Seminary in Los Angeles. Over time, they grew to love the West Coast's slower rhythms, its diversity of thought, and the ability it gave them to live away from the constant scrutiny of Duggar-related media attention. Santa Clarita, with its picturesque neighborhoods, good schools, and relative proximity to Los Angeles, offered the ideal balance between privacy and opportunity. Their new home, a beautiful Tudor-style residence, offered both old-world charm and modern elegance. With its steeply pitched gables, decorative timbering, and expansive interior layout, the house reflected their evolving tastes. Classic, grounded, but far from the rigid minimalism of Jinger's past life. Inside, they created a warm and inviting space for themselves and their two young daughters, blending traditional design with personal touches that made the home uniquely theirs. For Jinger, the house also served as a sanctuary, somewhere to breathe, reflect, and continue healing from the weight of her former identity. The physical separation from Arkansas was already significant, but owning a permanent home in California symbolized a point of no return. This wasn't a temporary move. This wasn't a sabbatical. This was home. The financial investment also represented another milestone in the Vuolos' journey. The nearly $2 million purchase marked a transition into self-sufficiency and quiet success, fueled not by reality TV money or fame, but by years of deliberate work. Between Jeremy's pastoral pursuits, podcasting, writing, and Jinger's two best-selling memoirs, Becoming Free Indeed and People Pleaser, the couple had slowly but confidently built a life on their own terms. Gone were the days of performing for cameras under the roof of a sprawling family compound. In Santa Clarita, Jinger and Jeremy could choose what to share and what to keep sacred. This autonomy gave them the space to raise their children without the pressures of public scrutiny or family-imposed expectations. The home became the backdrop for bedtime routines, home-cooked meals, walks through quiet neighborhoods, and daily moments of peace, mundane to some, but deeply meaningful to Jinger. Another layer of symbolism was the fact that the Tudor style, with its roots in English history, reflected strength and timelessness. Two qualities Jinger aspired to bring into her post-Duggar life. While the design offered charm and nostalgia, it also suggested permanence. The decision wasn't just about purchasing a property in a desirable neighborhood. It was about anchoring their family in a place where they could grow, flourish, and build new traditions, free from the burdens of their past. Jeremy, always intentional in his decisions, took pride in finding a place that offered safety, space, and inspiration. The couple had often spoken in interviews and podcast episodes about the importance of creating a home centered on truth, grace, and joy. This house, in many ways, became the physical embodiment of those ideals. Neighbors in Santa Clarita described the Vuolos as kind, grounded, and unassuming. Unlike their former lives immersed in public spectacle, their current days are filled with simple routines and community connections. Whether it's grocery runs, church gatherings, or taking their daughters to the park, Jinger and Jeremy have traded notoriety for normalcy, a trade they both appear deeply content with. Perhaps most striking about this transition is the quiet confidence with which Jinger now carries herself. The woman who once feared stepping out of line, who once hesitated to voice her own opinions, now stands rooted, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, in a life she chose for herself. The house in Santa Clarita isn't a monument to wealth or status. It's a symbol of restoration, a place of refuge, a reminder that freedom isn't just a concept to write about. It's something you can walk through, room by room, in the home you built from the ground up. March 2025 brought a new chapter of joy, growth, and deepened family bonds for Jinger Duggar Vuolo and her husband Jeremy Vuolo with the birth of their third child, a son named Finnegan Charles Vuolo. Born on March 29th, weighing a healthy 8 pounds, 1 ounce, Finnegan's arrival marked a momentous milestone in the couple's journey. Not just as parents, but as individuals who have chosen to build a life rooted in authenticity, love, and intentional family values. From the moment they announced Jinger's pregnancy late in 2024, there had been an outpouring of excitement from fans, friends, and family. But unlike the public spectacle of her early adult life, this time the Vuolos chose to share their news with a gentler, more private rhythm. Their social media presence around the pregnancy was warm, sincere, and measured, offering occasional glimpses into their anticipation while shielding much of the intimate journey for themselves and their daughters. When Finnegan made his long-awaited debut in late March, it wasn't through a magazine spread or a reality TV announcement, but via heartfelt Instagram posts that radiated genuine joy. One especially touching photo showed Felicity and Evangeline, the couple's 2 daughters, peeking over the edge of the hospital bed, wide-eyed and beaming as they met their baby brother for the first time. The tenderness of the moment was further amplified by the presence of Jinger's mother, Michelle Duggar, who was pictured lovingly cradling Finnegan, a gentle reminder of the complex but enduring bonds within the Duggar family. In her caption, Jinger wrote about the overwhelming beauty of watching her daughters become big sisters. "They've been practicing with dolls for months," she shared, "but nothing prepared me for the way their faces lit up when they saw him." She described how Felicity, now 6 years old, eagerly offered to help change diapers, while 3-year-old Evangeline was more fascinated with her brother's tiny toes and sleepy yawns. The name Finnegan Charles held special significance for the Vuolos. Finnegan was chosen for its Irish roots, reflecting a name both classic and full of charm, while Charles honored a beloved family figure on Jeremy's side. The name was, in many ways, a perfect symbol of the couple's balance between tradition and modernity, faith and freedom, past and present. It was also another reflection of their evolving approach to parenting, one focused not on replicating the rigid rules of Jinger's upbringing, but on fostering an environment of grace, warmth, and thoughtful connection. In interviews following Finnegan's birth, both Jinger and Jeremy expressed profound gratitude for a smooth delivery and the blessing of a healthy baby boy. Jeremy, often poetic in his words, spoke about the awe he felt seeing his son for the first time. He came into the world crying and strong, and in that moment, I felt God's kindness in a new way. Our hearts are full. Hospital photos showed Jinger glowing with post-delivery joy, her hair pulled back and her eyes full of emotion as she held Finnegan in her arms. There was no grand production, just raw, real family joy. Even in these early hours, it was clear the Vuolos had created a deeply nurturing, supportive environment for welcoming their newest addition. Back home in Santa Clarita, the family of 5 began adjusting to their new rhythm. Though the demands of caring for a newborn are universal, Jinger noted how different this experience felt from her first 2 postpartum seasons. Now, in a place of emotional security, surrounded by a life they intentionally crafted, she felt more grounded, more confident in her role as a mother and more able to savor the fleeting moments. In one tender post shared weeks later, she reflected, "It's the little things, those 3 a.m. feedings when the world is quiet, and he curls his hand around my finger. I don't want to rush through this. I want to hold on to every second." Jeremy echoed this sentiment, calling Finnegan's birth a recalibration of their priorities. With his pastoral duties and media commitments, his schedule had always been full, but now he found himself lingering longer at home, opting for more time with his son tucked against his chest, asleep, while the older girls danced around the living room in their pajamas. For fans who've followed Jinger's evolution over the years, from a young girl on 19 kids and counting, to a woman navigating the weight of legalism, to a mother carving out her own version of faith and family, Finnegan's arrival felt like a full-circle moment. Here was a woman once burdened by expectation, now living a life centered on love, clarity, and peace. A woman who had once feared stepping out of line, now raising children with gentleness, not control. Though Jinger and Jeremy continue to protect their children's privacy, avoiding overexposure and choosing carefully what moments to share, what they have offered is a powerful glimpse into what healing can look like, not just in words, but in legacy. Finnegan Charles, cradled by his big sisters, his mother's smile, and his father's prayers, enters a family transformed, not by perfection, but by purpose. Jinger Vuolo's connection to her upbringing remains a complex thread woven into the fabric of her adult life. Though she's stepped away from many of the ideologies that once defined her world, she hasn't severed ties completely. Instead, her relationship with the Duggar family and the sprawling Arkansas compound that served as the backdrop to much of 19 kids and counting continues to shift and evolve, colored by growth, distance, and cautious reconnection. In a mid-2025 episode of the Jinger and Jeremy podcast, Jinger offered listeners a rare window into this evolving dynamic. She recounted a recent visit to the family's Springdale property, a place once teeming with constant noise, bustling routines, and the ever-present camera crews of TLC. But what struck her most was how much had changed. Many of her younger siblings were now grown, stepping into adulthood with new responsibilities, perspectives, and quieter presences. The household she remembered, once ruled by a strict daily schedule and the teachings of Bill Gothard's IBLP, seemed markedly more subdued. Jinger described the compound not with judgment, but with a sense of peaceful detachment. She spoke of its transformation with curiosity and a touch of bittersweet nostalgia, observing how what was once a well-oiled machine of discipline and religious repetition now seemed like a more relaxed, even rustic, family home. There were fewer rules charted on the whiteboards, fewer urgent footsteps echoing through the halls, and, in a charming surprise, she revealed that livestock, chickens, goats, and a few rabbits, had taken up residence in the backyard, giving the space a touch of pastoral tranquility that hadn't existed in her youth. The sight of animals running freely through the backyard brought a quiet smile to her face. It symbolized, in some ways, a softening of the compound's rigid edges. Jinger noted how her children, Felicity and Evangeline, found joy in petting the animals, unconcerned by the weight of the family history tied to the grounds they played on. Watching them wander the same soil where she once felt so confined was both healing and surreal. It reminded her how far she'd come, and how much life had moved on without her needing to completely distance herself from her past. Still, the visit wasn't without its complexities. Jinger admitted that reconnecting in person, even in small doses, can be emotionally layered. There are still unspoken tensions beneath the surface, stemming from her public break with the IBLP's theology and her memoirs that have laid bare her transformation. While most of her siblings remain in the religious fold to varying degrees, Jinger is careful not to press or provoke. She emphasized on the podcast that she's more interested in building bridges than burning them, even if some conversations remain off-limits. What stood out in this recent encounter was the shared understanding that things can change without severing entirely. Though their lifestyles and beliefs have diverged, Jinger and her family were able to come together with mutual respect, laughter, and a few storytelling moments that didn't rely on shared doctrine. It was a refreshing departure from the emotionally loaded visits of the past. No debates, no sideways glances, just people reorienting in the wake of maturity and time. Jeremy, her husband, also offered his perspective on the visit during the episode. He described the Duggars as warm and welcoming, noting that even though he and Jinger had taken a drastically different spiritual and lifestyle path, he felt respected. The couple chose not to stay overnight, instead keeping the visit short and sweet, a deliberate boundary that protected their peace while still honoring familial connection. Jinger's reflections made it clear that while her core identity has transformed, she doesn't view her past with bitterness. Rather, she sees it as part of a long arc, a foundation that, while imperfect and at times painful, gave her the strength to chart her own course. Her memories of the compound no longer trigger anxiety, but invite reflection on growth, healing, and the paradox of holding love for people while holding different beliefs. As she continues building a life rooted in self-awareness and spiritual autonomy, Jinger isn't interested in condemning those still enmeshed in the world she left behind. Instead, her recent visit stands as a quiet testament to the possibility of evolving relationships, where shared history can be honored without being repeated. And for Jinger, that's more than enough. What do you think about Jinger Duggar Vuolo? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.